The runaways return. You don't get to say my name, Violet spat, her hand shaking. Not after 10 years. The man in the suit stiffened, his cold blue eyes locked onto hers, recognition flickering through his carefully guarded expression. Violet, he whispered. But she wasn't the same girl he had abandoned, and he wasn't just a man looking for redemption. He was a man with secrets, secrets that had just put her life in danger. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and grease, a familiar haze that clung to Violet Thompson's worn-out apron. At 25, she moved with the efficiency of someone twice her age, balancing trays and dodging spilled ketchup in a rhythm born from years of survival. Her dark skin glistened with sweat under the flickering fluorescent lights, and her braided hair was pulled back tight, a shield against the chaos of the late-night shift. The town of Willow Creek was small, white, and unforgiving, a place where Violet had learned to keep her head down and her fists clenched. Abandoned by her father at 15 and orphaned by her mother's death 2 years later, she'd been shaped by loss into something sharp-edged and resilient. It was a Thursday night, quiet except for the hum of the jukebox, when he walked in. The man wore a tailored suit that screamed money, his silver hair catching the light as he slid into a booth near the window. Violet didn't recognize him at first, just another out-of-towner slumming it for a late-night burger. But when she approached, pen poised over her notepad, his voice hit her like a freight train. "Coffee, black, and make it quick," he said, not looking up from his phone. That voice, deep-clipped, with a faint drawl, she hadn't heard in a decade. Her hand froze mid-air, the pen trembling. She studied his face, the sharp jawline, the cold blue eyes, and the pieces clicked into place. Arthur Sterling, her father, the man who'd walked out on her and her mother 10 years ago, leaving them to drown in debt and despair. "You?" she whispered, her voice a jagged edge. He looked up, irritation flashing across his face until their eyes met. His expression faltered, a flicker of recognition breaking through the mask of indifference. "Violet," he said, almost too softly to hear. "Don't you dare say my name," she snapped, slamming the notepad onto the table. The few late-night patrons turned to stare, but Violet didn't care. Years of buried rage erupted like a volcano. 10 years. 10 damn years, and you waltz in here like nothing happened? Where were you when Mom died? When we lost everything? Arthur's face tightened, but he didn't flinch. "Violet, I can explain." "Explain," she laughed, bitter and loud. "You left us. You left me with nothing but a note that said, 'I'm sorry.' Do you know what that does to a kid? Do you?" "I had to," he said, his voice low, urgent. "My world, my business, it was dangerous. I left to protect you and your mother." "Protect us?" Violet's eyes blazed. "We weren't protected. We were abandoned. Mom worked herself to death, and I've been scraping by ever since. You don't get to play the hero now." The diner fell silent, the air thick with tension. Arthur opened his mouth, then closed it, his hands clenching into fists on the table. Violet waited, chest heaving, daring him to say something worth hearing. But he didn't. He just stared at her, a billionaire humbled by the daughter he discarded. "I hate you," she spat, tearing off her apron and throwing it at his feet. "Stay the hell away from me." She stormed out, the bell above the door jangling like a gunshot in her wake. Arthur Sterling sat in his sleek black car outside the diner, the weight of Violet's words pressing against his ribs. He'd built an empire, tech, real estate, shadowy deals that kept regulators at bay, but nothing had prepared him for this. Seeing her, all grown up and furious, had cracked something inside him he'd long buried: regret. He'd told himself leaving was noble, that his enemies, ruthless men tied to his past, would have destroyed his family. But Violet's eyes told a different story. He destroyed them anyway. He needed advice, someone who knew Violet better than he ever would. Pulling out his phone, he dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "Evelyn," he said when the line picked up. Violet's grandmother, the only family she had left. "Richard." Evelyn's voice was sharp, suspicious. "What do you want?" "I saw Violet tonight. She hates me, and I don't blame her. I want to fix this." Evelyn laughed, cold and dry. "Fix it? You can't fix a decade of pain, boy. You broke that girl's heart when you left, and I've been picking up the pieces ever since." "I know," he said, swallowing hard. "But I need to try. Tell me what to do." There was a long pause. "She doesn't need your money or your excuses. She needs you to show up, not just once, but every damn day until she believes you won't run again. Start with the truth, all of it." The line went dead. Arthur stared at the phone, Evelyn's words echoing. Could he give Violet that truth without dragging her into the darkness he'd fled? Violet's apartment was a cramped one-bedroom above a laundromat, the hum of the dryers a constant lullaby. She sat on her sagging couch, staring at a photo of her mother, smiling, alive, before Arthur's absence drained her. The knock at her door jolted her upright. She wasn't expecting anyone. Peering through the peephole, she saw him. Arthur. Her stomach twisted. Against her better judgment, she opened the door a crack. "What do you want?" she demanded. He held up an envelope, his hands unsteady. "I wrote you something. Please, just read it." She snatched it and slammed the door, her heart pounding. Alone, she tore it open. The letter was handwritten, his script shaky but deliberate. "Violet, I've spent 10 years lying to myself, saying I left to keep you safe. The truth is, I was a coward. My business wasn't just dangerous, it was dirty. I made enemies, powerful ones, and I ran instead of fighting for you and your mother. I regret it every day. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to be here now, if you'll let me. No excuses, just me trying. Arthur. She read it twice, tears blurring the ink. Part of her wanted to burn it, to scream at him again. But another part, the part that still remembered his laugh, his bedtime stories, ached for something more. She opened the door. Don't get to waltz back in like it's that easy, she said, her voice trembling. But I'll hear you out. Once. He nodded, stepping inside, and they began to talk. Weeks passed, a slow dance of mistrust and tentative steps. Arthur showed up every day, no matter how many times Violet yelled or slammed the door in his face. He listened, really listened, as she unloaded years of pain. She told him about the eviction notices, the nights she went hungry, the way her mother's cough turned to cancer. He didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself, just took it, his silence a kind of penance. But the story wasn't that simple. One night, as they sat over takeout in her apartment, a brick crashed through her window, glass shattering across the floor. Violet screamed, ducking as Arthur pulled her down. A note was tied to the brick, scrawled in red ink. Sterling. You can't hide forever. What the hell is this? Violet demanded, her voice shaking as she held up the note. Arthur's face went pale. I thought I'd outrun them, he muttered. Outrun who? She pressed. He took a deep breath, the truth spilling out at last. 10 years ago, I was deep in a deal, illegal tech sold to the wrong people, a cartel. When it went south, they came after me. I left to draw them away from you and your mom. But they never stopped looking. I've been paying them off ever since, keeping them quiet. Seeing you again, I guess they found me. Violet stared at him, fury and fear warring inside her. So you brought this to my door? After everything. I didn't know they'd track me here, he said, desperate. I'll fix it, I swear. But the danger escalated. Days later, Violet found her car, tires slashed, a photo of her pinned under the wiper with a single word. Next. She called Arthur, furious, and he arrived with a plan. I'm turning myself in, he said. The feds have been after the cartel for years. I'll give them everything. Names, dates, evidence. It'll end this. And what about you? Violet asked, her voice small. You'll go to prison, maybe, he admitted. But you'll be safe. That's what matters. For the first time, she saw him not as a villain who'd left, but as a flawed man trying to make amends. She didn't forgive him, not yet, but she didn't stop him either. The sting went down fast. Arthur wore a wire, meeting the cartel's enforcer in a warehouse on the edge of town. Violet waited in a safe house with Evelyn, her nerves frayed as hours ticked by. When the call came, Arthur's voice tired but alive, she exhaled a breath she hadn't known she was holding. They're gone, he said. Arrested. It's over. He showed up at her door the next day, free but fragile, the weight of his choices etched into his face. Violet let him in, and they sat in silence for a long time. I still don't know if I can forgive you, she said finally. But I don't hate you anymore. Arthur nodded, tears in his eyes. That's more than I deserve. The ending wasn't neat. Trust was a fragile thing, built on coffee dates and quiet apologies, interrupted by Violet's occasional storms of anger. But there was hope, a flicker like a diner light buzzing back to life. Arthur stayed, not as a savior, but as a father earning his place. And Violet, for the first time in years, felt the shadow of absence begin to lift.